You're watching Reason and Theology Live, a show dedicated to charitable discussion, debates, interviews, commentary, and analysis. The show concentrates on theological topics, historical matters, and philosophical problems with content ranging from introductory material to in-depth examinations. And now, your host, Michael Law.
Welcome back to Reason and Theology, everybody, on a Wednesday evening. Your host, Michael. Got a returning guest for us. Honored to have him back on. Jimmy Akin from Catholic Answers Live. I've been watching a lot of his videos lately, especially the Mysterious World videos. Those are, well, I say videos, they're actually podcasts. It's audio only, but really, really good stuff. I've been enjoying it. So going to have him on here in just a moment. We're going to be talking about ghosts, fallen angels, and extraterrestrials. Jimmy Akin coming up next. Hey, Jimmy, welcome back to the show. How are you?
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah, we had a great time last time talking about the magisterium, and I thought this would be a really fun topic. By the way, I saw one of your, I think it was a post that you did, where you were talking about this guy who's an expert in some really ancient tablets and things like that, and I think he's a curator of a museum. You pointed me to, in the post you pointed us to one of the videos, and I watched it. It was about the origin of ghosts and things like that. It was really, really good stuff. So yeah, I've been enjoying the stuff you've been posting.
That guy is his name is Irving. I want to say Israel Finkelstein, and that's not it. It's Irving Finkel, if I recall correctly. He's a curator at the British Museum. He's an expert in cuneiform writing and ancient Mesopotamian literature. He's the discoverer of the rules for a game that's often called the Royal Game of Ur.
Oh, yeah.
This game is old enough that and was very popular in the ancient world. It probably was played by Abraham.
Oh, wow.
And there's an online website where you can play it just against a computer. And so sometimes to relax, I'll go and play the Royal Game of Ur just for fun. But he is a hoot. He is really funny. He's got some YouTube videos that you can watch, including this one on ghosts. And he's always a delight to watch. He's very feisty. And incidentally, you mentioned Mysterious World. It is a podcast, but there's also a YouTube version of it. If you go to my channel on YouTube, just type in Jimmy Akin. That's what you'll find as the current main content of the channel is a YouTube version of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World podcast.
Is it audio only, or is there video with it?
There's a static image right now. We don't yet have the budget to do video editing, but you can still watch it. Have it running in the background.
All right.
Also, we're starting to incorporate some video. I just did, it's not out yet, but I just did a 2-part interview with one of the U.S. government's original psychic spies. That will be a full video version.
And pardon me, but what is a psychic spy? Help me out. I don't know what this is.
So back during the Cold War, the Russians were pouring millions of dollars, not rubles, but millions of dollars into researching psychic phenomena and saying, could this help us defeat the hated Americans? And so the hated Americans said, hey, if they're spending that much actual money on this, we probably ought to investigate it too. And so back in the 1970s, they started a program. The CIA originally started it, and then the Defense Department got involved. And there was a program that was created as a result of what they found, where they employed certain people to use a technique called remote viewing to try to distantly view and pick up information about various sites in the world, including, Soviet technology and Chinese nuclear missile tests and things like that. Subsequently, this program ultimately became known as Stargate. And subsequently, it was declassified, and all the documents are available, and all the people were released from their security oaths. And so they can talk about it freely now. And I thought, wow, it would be interesting to talk to some of those guys. So I recently interviewed one, and that'll be coming out soon.
I want to hear that because I have a whole lot of questions about that, but then they're related to the ones I'm about to ask you. So let me ask you those first. The first thing that I wanted to,
and we do cover, could this psychic stuff all just be demons? We definitely talk about
that was going to be my question. you read my mind. So,
hey, there's some evidence for psychic powers right
there
there.
you go. So, okay, first things first, what exactly are ghosts, and are they different than demons? Is there a distinction there?
Well, the way the English term ghost works, yes. So ghost, now English, because it has, originally it evolved from like Anglo-Saxon, which is a Germanic language or set of languages. And but then in 1066, the Normans, who were French speakers, conquered England. And so English inherited this double vocabulary, some of its words have a Germanic origin, and some of them have a Romance language or Latin origin. So we often in English have two words for the same thing. Mm-hmm. And that happens here. If you take the Germanic word Geist and bring it into English, it becomes ghost. If you take the Latin word spiritus and bring it into English, it becomes spirit. But Geist and spiritus mean the same thing. And so ghost and spirit mean the same thing. That's why the Holy Spirit is also called the Holy Ghost, mm-hmm. because the ghost and the spirit are just the same thing. Now, originally, the term ghost could apply to any kind of spirit. It could apply to the Holy Spirit. It could apply to angelic spirits, including demons who are just fallen angels, and it could apply to human spirits. The way the term ghost has evolved in English, though, the angelic spirit meaning of ghost has kind of dropped out. And so today we wouldn't apply that to demons. Instead, ghost gets applied either to the Holy Ghost or to human spirits. And so a ghost is simply, in the standard English meaning of the word, is a departed human spirit. And so consequently, since it's a human spirit, it wouldn't be a demon, because demons are fallen angelic spirits.
Mm. Well, now, okay, if it is maybe a human spirit, mm-hmm. how does that work with scriptures that talk about being absent from the body is present with the Lord, which we hear a lot from Protestants?
Yeah, that's not.
How does that work with that?
That's not what Paul actually says. What Paul says is, I would rather be absent from the body and present with the Lord mm-hmm. than doing my earthly ministry right now. And so that's an expression of his preference. He says, okay, I'd rather not be in the body. I'd rather be with Jesus. But he doesn't say those two are the same thing. Obviously, if someone is damned, well, they may be absent from the body, but they're not present with Jesus. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, just expressing a preference like this doesn't tell you anything about timing or what may happen after you die. I mean, I could say, let's say I'm at work at the office. I could say I'd rather be away from the office and at home in bed, but that doesn't mean leaving the office results in you instantaneously being at home in bed. You may have travel time, you might get in a car wreck on the way home, any number of things could happen. And so merely saying that I'd like this to happen doesn't guarantee that it's going to happen or that it'll happen instantaneously. Mm-hmm. Also, even if you are with Jesus in heaven, that doesn't mean that God can't allow you to manifest on earth. Mm-hmm. The Virgin Mary is with Jesus in heaven, but she can still appear to people in visions and so forth here on earth. So could, other saints. Now, Mary's a special case because she has her body with her, since she was assumed body and soul into heaven. Mm-hmm. But other spirits don't. So if Saint Bernard or Saint Francis or Saint Thomas Aquinas appears to someone in a vision, well, he's with Jesus in heaven, but he can also manifest here on earth if it's God's will.
Mm-hmm. What do you do with people who say, okay, maybe in a haunted house or something like that, they'll say, well, there's a spirit of so-and-so who lived here in the 1800s and they have unfinished business. What do you do with that? How do you understand that from a Catholic paradigm?
Well, I think there are a number of possibilities. We have to, and this is one of the things we always do on Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, is we look at the range of possibilities that could explain a phenomenon. And then we look at them, we evaluate them from the perspectives of faith and reason. So, what could explain ghostly phenomena that people report? Well, okay, it could be that it's somebody's imagination, that they are thinking, ooh, I feel a presence here, but it's just their imagination. Or it could be they're hearing something or feeling something, like maybe they hear a banging noise in the night, or maybe they feel a cold draft in a certain part of a room. But that could also be natural. There could be just the aerodynamics of the room make it colder here, or you've got water pipes with bubbles in them that make banging noises during the night. So that could be simply natural as well. And there is something going on. You're just misinterpreting it as a ghost rather than what it actually is. Then there's the possibility that it could be a genuine human spirit that's manifesting in some way. And there's actually a couple of variants here. Some have suggested, and this is just a suggestion, remember, I'm not endorsing any of these. I'm not evaluating them. But some have suggested that maybe, and if I'm not mistaken, G.K. Chesterton speculated along these lines, that there may be a kind of psychic residue that people leave. They make an impression on the place they're at. And even though their spirit has gone to be with God or wherever its fate is, there could be a kind of residual mental component that's left behind that people might feel, that might manifest in some way. Then there's the possibility, which is the classical understanding, that you're dealing with the spirit of a dead person. And that person could either, from a Christian point of view, we're starting to cross into the faith perspective now. That person would, if they're dead, they would either be saved in heaven, in purgatory, or they would be lost in hell. And according to St. Thomas Aquinas, all three of those are possibilities. If you read the Summa Theologiae, he says that the saints, by God's will, can manifest to the living, and the souls in purgatory can do that. And there are reports of that throughout Christian history. You'll read reports like in a monastery, let's say, and the sisters will see a nun who's dead saying her prayers in front of the Blessed Sacrament because she was inattentive to that duty when she was alive. And so as part of her purgatory, she's manifesting in a way, and God's allowing her to be seen by others as a kind of a warning not to be inattentive in your duties, or you may have to have some extra purgatory. Also, there are reports of departed souls in purgatory that are in need of the prayers of the living to help them get out of purgatory. And so you have reports of that as well. And then St. Thomas Aquinas also said, if God wants it to happen, the souls of the damned can even appear to the living as a way of kind of scaring them back onto the straight and narrow. So all of those are possibilities. And then you have the other possibility, which is the one that people, I think, leap to a little too quickly in our day and age, where there's a tendency to, it's unfortunate, but there's a tendency for people to say anything that is strange or weird, it must be demons. Well, it could be demons. You could have demons. You could have a house that's been infested. That's the correct term. Places get infested. People get possessed. But you could have a place that's been infested by demons, and that could be the explanation for what's going on. So there's a range of possibilities, and I don't think any one of them is the explanation. I think a lot of times it is a purely natural explanation. It's either someone's imagination or they're misinterpreting something that is going on, like the cold draft or the bubbles in the pipes. But then there are these other possibilities as well. And so I don't dismiss any one of them out of hand. I think what you have to do is look at every single case individually and say, what does the evidence point to in this case?
Now, you mentioned demons there. For those of us who really aren't familiar, I mean, we've heard the term, right? But we might not really know their origin and what exactly they are. What exactly is a demon?
Okay, so on the Christian understanding, a demon Now, you find the concept of demons in all kinds of different religions. Basically, in every religion that has the concept, and it's pretty much all of them that I can think of, a demon is a harmful spirit. It's an evil spirit. In the Christian view, a demon is a fallen angel. So angels are created intellects. Unlike us, they do have spirits. They are spirits. But they don't have bodies naturally the way human beings do. So they're created to be purely spiritual beings rather than the mixed body-spirit combination that we are. And like us, angels are given a choice. Are you going to follow God or not? And when angels make that choice, their choice becomes fixed, and they either become good angels or bad angels. Just like at the end of our lives, our choice for God, for or against God, is fixed, and you're either saved or you're lost. Well, that happens for angels. That's already happened for angels. And so the good ones we call the holy angels, like Saint Michael the Archangel or Saint Gabriel. And then the bad angels are the demons. So they're just bad angels. They're demons that they're angels that went rotten.
Now, I might be reading too much into you, but you said for a moment there, they don't naturally have bodies. Does that mean you believe that in the Nephilim theory that in Genesis 6, you have fallen angels who took on a human, well, somehow mixed with human daughters and had progeny?
So, so this is an event that's mentioned in Genesis 6, where you have a group called the sons of God that intermarry with the daughters of men, and they have what appear to be these people called Nephilim, which is an Aramaic word that means giants, which is the way that the Septuagint Greek Old Testament translated. It uses the word gigantes. And actually, now I have an episode of Mysterious World just on the Nephilim, and I go through all the different theories about who the Nephilim might be and what this passage might mean. And even though my native inclination historically has been to read this naturalistically and say the sons of God in this passage are some kind of human beings, when you actually study the literature before this, like in Mesopotamia, and after this in Second Temple literature in Judaism, actually there's a strong case to be made that the text is talking about angelic beings. We see angels, like at the beginning of Job, referred to as the sons of God. It's the same phrase. And so when you take all of the literature into account, at least that's the way it looks like what the text is depicting. Now, because early Genesis involves a lot of symbolism, there's a question of how literally is this meant to be taken? What exactly is being communicated here? There are other possibilities besides angels acquiring physical bodies and siring human children. However, to talk from the perspective of St. Thomas Aquinas for a moment, St. Thomas Aquinas and the others would say, well, angels can have manipulating matter. That's something we would call telekinesis or psychokinesis today. They can manipulate matter. We see them doing that in the Old Testament. Like when the angel strikes Jerusalem with a plague after David takes a census. Well, a plague is microorganisms, so the angel is moving around microorganisms. So even though he's not physical, he can affect physical things. And if you can do that, then you could manipulate matter in such a way as to come up with something that looks like a human body. Now, Aquinas and others of the medieval period would say they had a special name for the kind of bodies angels and demons could make for themselves. They called them aerial bodies. And the idea was they took matter from the air and they knitted it together into a kind of temporary body that they then manipulated to interact with human beings. Now, I wonder if they can do that, why can't they make it a full human body? Because Aquinas would say, well, even though it's an aerial body, there are certain things they can't do. He would say they could, and he does say this in the Summa Theologiae, that they can't use the body to get a woman pregnant. For some reason, they can't do that with a body. They're not making a full human body. An aerial body is a physical thing, but it's not a fully human body. Why that would be the case, I don't know, but that's his view. He does say, though, that you can have situations where a demon gets somebody pregnant. In those situations, what Aquinas says is that the demon has procured the necessary reproductive cells from one human and is then using it to get another human pregnant. And so he will say, well, like, okay, a demon could appear to a man as an incubus and acquire the needed germ cells, and then appear to a woman as a succubus. I'm sorry, I've got him reversed. He appears to the man as a succubus, gets the cells, goes to a woman as an incubus, and impregnates her. But Aquinas says that in this case, the one born of the demon is still a full human being because the original cells came from a human. And that actually is one way that Aquinas, now this is not Aquinas's preferred view of the Nephilim in Genesis 6, but he acknowledges it's a possible view. And so he would say that this is a possibility for one way that angels or fallen angels could end up fathering children, but the children would still be fully human. You might then wonder, well, okay, could they make some changes if they can affect matter on the microscopic level, like with plague organisms, like, viruses and stuff? Could they make small changes that might result in the children being larger than normal stature and thus giants from an ancient perspective? Well, maybe they could. All of this is just possibilities. I'm not saying that this is all right or that this actually happened. I'm just sketching the possibilities that have been explored in the history of Jewish and Christian and Catholic thought.
Yeah, I tend to lean to the fallen angels going into the daughters of men theory as well. But yeah, okay, so the next thing here, extraterrestrials, aliens.
Yeah.
First of all, do you think they're real? And then second of all, do you think they're demons?
Well, okay, so let's deal with the last question first.
Okay.
So by extraterrestrial, we mean a biological life form that is intelligent. I mean, we're not talking about extraterrestrial microbes or plants. We mean a biological organism that is intelligent and from another planet or from elsewhere in our universe that's not terrestrial, that's not from Earth. Well, okay, if that's the definition of an extraterrestrial, then extraterrestrials would not be demons because demons are fallen angels. They aren't biological organisms. Do I think extraterrestrials exist? I think I'm open on that question. I don't have a firm opinion. If you pressed me to the wall and said, give me your best guess, I would say probably I think somewhere in the universe there are probably other intelligent species that God has created, because look at how big it all is. What's happening with all that space out there, with all those billions and billions of other stars with their trillions of planets. Why is that all there? I mean, there's kind of a semi-theological, semi-scientific case you could make. It incorporates elements of both faith and science, but you say, look, okay, God used our planet and our sun to house us. And we see there are other planets and other suns out there. We first saw that there are other suns. Then we found out, okay, they've got planets. Now we're seeing a lot of their planets are in similar habitable zones around their suns. And they've got the right chemistry. Some of them have a lot of water, we can tell. We're seeing things that look a lot more like us out there, and we have to be open to the possibility that God would do there something like what he did here. And the more environments like that we find, the greater the odds are he may have done that elsewhere. We already know he's created more intelligent species than us because angels are intelligent. And there are different kinds of angels. And so we already know God has created multiple different kinds of intelligent beings, humans, seraphim, cherubim, things like that. And so why wouldn't there be other biological ones out there? It doesn't prove there are, but given the math, my guess is, yeah, there probably are. Whether they've reached Earth or not is a separate question. And that one I'm open to. When it comes to could some of the things that people are reporting as extraterrestrials be demons here on Earth? Well, I think a similar calculus applies to what I said about ghosts. Sometimes I think some reports of intelligent aliens here on Earth are just people's imaginations. Sometimes I think it's a misinterpretation of natural phenomena, like the banging in the water pipes with ghosts. Sometimes it might be real aliens that have made contact. Other times it might be demons masquerading as angels. So I think all of those are possibilities. What you have to do is look at the evidence in particular cases and say, where does the evidence point in this case? And as with ghosts, I think most of the reports are going to be either imagination or misinterpretation of natural things. I can't rule out that there are some extraterrestrials that have made contact with Earth, but I have yet to find a case that I find thoroughly convincing. Also, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Well, I was just going to say, if they were real, do you think that they would need salvation?
Oh, I have a whole episode of Mysterious World on aliens and the religious implications. It's episode 55 if people want to look it up. The answer is it'll depend. So God made mankind in an unfallen state, and then our first parents fell, and as a result, we need salvation. Well, if he made us in an unfallen state, then presumably he would do that for all of his creatures. He did the same thing for angels, and then he gives his creatures a choice. And in the case of the human race, we fell as a whole, but we didn't have to. The standard theological account is that if Adam and Eve had maintained the state of grace, at a certain point, they would have passed their period of probation and been confirmed in grace, the same way the saints in heaven are confirmed in grace, in which case our race would be unfallen. So there could be, if there are extraterrestrial species out there, some of them could have remained unfallen. Some of them could have fallen like us and been in need of salvation. And in another case, since we have the angels as a control group, well, some of the angels are unfallen, but some of them are fallen. So we might meet a species that's like the angels. They're half fallen and half not fallen. So some are already confirmed in grace and others are already confirmed in evil. So there's a variety of possibilities, but some aliens might indeed need salvation.
Now, you briefly somewhat answered it, but do you think that there's any good evidence that they exist? You said there's nothing that has convinced you, but do you think that there's maybe some evidence that would maybe suggest a probability that they exist?
Well, I think the thing that I find most persuasive is kind of the argument I've already mounted, which is the math, given the number of stars and planets out there, and the fact that God made us here, and we know he made other intelligent species like the angels. All of that suggests to me that, yeah, probably given the size of it out there, I would guess, if I had to, that there probably are intelligent aliens somewhere in the universe. In terms of them coming here, that's a much more challenging thing. And there are different arguments that you can make about would we expect them to have arrived here or not. You can actually argue it both ways. There are arguments that no, we wouldn't because of the distance and the energy involved in getting from one star system to another at the speed of light or slower. But then there are arguments that go the other way. Even so, it may be possible to travel faster than light. Physics doesn't actually forbid traveling faster than light. What it says is we don't know how to do it. But there are proposed ways where it could work. Like there is a Mexican physicist named Alcubierre who developed a theory. It's now known as the Alcubierre warp drive. It's a theoretical way of traveling faster than light by stretching and contracting space in front of and behind the spaceship. And he got the idea for his warp drive by watching Star Trek. And it turns out, well, if we could find this stuff called negative energy, we could make an Alcubierre warp drive. So maybe if you've got a race that's 1 million years ahead of us, they could have faster than light travel. On the other hand, maybe they don't need faster than light travel, because in 1 million years, you could make slower than light probes that could replicate. You send a probe off to a nearby star system. It scoops up the material it needs to make a couple more probes. It sends them off. And over the course of 1 million years, you could colonize a galaxy with such probes and establish an interstellar or galactic internet of communicating probes from all over the place. This is kind of what happens in 2001: A Space Odyssey, where the monoliths are the probes that go out and do this. This is a type of probe, by the way, that's called a von Neumann probe, after John von Neumann, the physicist. And so the possibility of even slower than light colonization or exploration by probe is something that has led to what's called the Fermi paradox, named after Enrico Fermi, the physicist, one of the inventors of the atomic bomb, who famously in the 1950s said, well, where is everybody? If there are species that have been around and intelligent for more than 1 million years or even longer, why haven't we seen their probes yet? And then there are a bunch of proposed solutions to the Fermi paradox. And by the way, we have an episode of Mysterious World on the Fermi paradox. But there are proposed solutions, like maybe they have colonized the galaxy or explored the galaxy with their probes, but they don't want to interfere with us because we're still primitive. Maybe they have something like Star Trek's Prime Directive, where you don't make contact with the slow guys who aren't up to speed yet. Or maybe they have made contact and they're UFOs. Or maybe civilizations don't tend to last long enough to colonize or explore the galaxy. Maybe there's something called the Great Filter that keeps them from lasting very long once they become technological, like the invention of nuclear weaponry. Maybe they go extinct really quick after they invent technology. So there are different proposed solutions for all that.
Did you see, I think it was on, I forget the guy's name, Tucker or something like that, but just a few days ago I saw some video of
Tucker Carlson?
Yeah, some video of new alien evidence. Did you see that?
Yeah, I have.
What do you think about it?
So for the last few years, there has been reporting coming out of the Defense Department, the Pentagon, about a program that has been established. It was originally established in the Navy to investigate unexplained aerial phenomena. That's the current preferred term, UAP, unexplained aerial phenomena, that have been dogging our Navy ships. And there have been a number of videos that have been released. Recently, a new video of UAPs, or UFOs to use the classic term, was leaked from, it was about a number of these objects that swarmed a battle group off the coast of San Diego here back in 2019, so just 2 years ago or less. And over multiple nights, there were these objects hovering around these ships, and they look like little pyramid-shaped objects that are like kind of spinning around and hovering in the air. In this case, in other cases, they've looked like other things. Like there is a famous 2004 incident also off the coast of San Diego here called the Tic Tac incident, where they encountered an object that looked like a giant Tic Tac. And they've acknowledged these things are real and we don't know what they are. So the possibilities are basically threefold. Number one, someone in our military industrial complex does know what they are, but because things are so highly compartmentalized, the left hand isn't talking to the right hand, And so the right people don't know, but somebody does. Possibility number two, they're not ours, but they're from one of our nation state competitors, most likely Russia or China. And number three, maybe they're extraterrestrial. So those are the possibilities about what they are, and there are arguments to be made for each one of those possibilities.
Now, we've talked about them a few times on the show, and I want to get your opinion here.
Okay.
Ancient astronaut theorists, right? You know, from the History Channel, they have the show called Ancient Aliens, which I've found to be the most entertaining thing out there, but not necessarily the best as far as evidence, at least from what I've seen. Mm-hmm. What is your opinion on them? Do you think that they're credible or not really?
So I haven't seen the show Ancient Aliens. I have looked at ancient astronaut theories. They were very popular when I was growing up. Back in the 1970s, there was a guy named Erich von Daniken who had a book and a documentary called Chariots of the Gods. And then NOVA did an evaluation of Chariots of the Gods. NOVA is a science program. And also a book got published called Crash Go the Chariots, because von Daniken's evidence was not good. And it's interesting, to think about, well, okay, suppose there were species that were millions of years earlier than us when they developed, because the universe is billions of years old and our galaxy is billions of years old. So it's quite possible that there would be races millions of years ahead of us. And could they have reached Earth? Well, they could have, one way or another. Could they have left evidence here on Earth of early encounters with humans? Yeah, they could have. It's hypothetically possible. Interestingly, famous skeptic and often debunker Carl Sagan thought that this was a real possibility that should be taken seriously. He wrote a paper and published it about how we should take seriously the possibility, not the probability, but the possibility that there might have been extraterrestrial contact in the distant human past, and we might be able to recover traces of it. However, having said that, I have yet to find anything that I find convincing. I think that that too often people who are into this ancient aliens idea are misreading the historical evidence, and I haven't yet found anything that I find to be a credible case of ancient extraterrestrial contact.
Now, I've heard of things where you at least, and I can't think of any specific cases, but I've heard people say, well, the people in the 1500s in Germany had different sightings, and you'll hear of stuff like that. Have there been cases where maybe a Christian society has identified or thought that they saw a UFO? Have there been historical cases of that?
Well, so there are sort of two famous ones both from the 1500s and actually from within 5 years of each other. One of them, actually, let me back up first. One of the things you'll see on some of these ancient alien shows is paintings from, the Renaissance and thereafter, but Christian paintings depicting the Virgin Mary or other things. And they will find objects in the sky in these paintings, and they'll say, oh, that's a UFO. Well, no, it's not. And art historians know it's not, because they're historians of art. They see how artistic trends develop over time. So, like, for example, there's a famous painting that you'll see in some ancient alien shows that it's got a little, what looks like to our eyes like a craft. It's a circle, and it's got kind of a long point coming out of one end and some other kind of spiky things coming out of the other end, and it's got a little guy in the middle of the craft.
Right.
And they'll say, okay, this looks like kind of a rocket or something with a little passenger in it. That's not what it is. It's the sun. And we know this because there's this whole history of art in this period where, especially at the crucifixion and scenes of the crucifixion, they would paint the sun and the moon in the sky. And they would stylize them, just like we have the man in the moon, or we'll, in kids' art, we'll have a smiley face sun. Well, they did the same thing. And this is the sun and the moon bearing witness to the death of the Son of God. And so you have various stylized versions of the sun and the moon. You can trace them across time in this genre of painting. And yeah, okay, this is just one of the more stylized versions. It's not a UFO at all. It's just the sun, the way they were depicting it at the time. But then there are other things that have been claimed to be sightings in this period. The two famous ones, the most famous one occurred in 1561 over Nuremberg. And then a few years later, in 1566, there was another one over Basel, Switzerland. And what they saw is debated. Now, they did do illustrations of what they saw that are in the sky, that are in broadsheets, which are kind of an old-fashioned equivalent of newspapers. And so they would, have a woodcutter make an illustration. They publish a story about it. Well, they did not interpret these as extraterrestrial craft. They said, we saw this strange stuff in the sky. There was a bunch of it. It looked like this, and then they'll describe it. And they said, these are signs from God. These are things that God is putting in the sky to show us that we need to repent, or whatever. But repent was the common theme, because what they saw, they said, was very amazing and miraculous. They would see these objects that seemed to come out of the sun, and this is the Nuremberg one. They saw these objects that seemed to come out of the sun, and then they fought with each other for like an hour in the sky, and then they fell down to earth and caused a lot of smoke. So that could have been any number of things. Number one, could have been a hoax. It's not like we don't have UFO hoaxes today. Someone could have a divine sign in the sky hoax back then. Newspapers, in the 19th century and even the 20th century have published hoaxes. And so you could have 1500s broadsheets publishing hoaxes. Or it could be they saw a natural phenomenon. One possibility I've seen suggested for the Nuremberg incident is a sundog. A sundog is an aerial phenomena where the sun looks like it has two other bright glowing objects on either side of it. So you got an object on each side of the sun. But that doesn't really fit what they described seeing. What strikes me as a possibility for what they could have seen if it wasn't aliens is a daytime airburst meteor shower, where you have a bunch of meteors coming in and bursting in the atmosphere, and some of them may fall down, survive enough of the atmosphere that they end up falling down on the ground and causing fires. That could, the daytime airburst meteor shower, that could explain what they saw. Or it could have been aliens, but I don't think the evidence for aliens is particularly good in this case.
Now, shifting gears just a little bit back to the ghosts, we have in ancient civilizations, and pretty much every civilization has traditions of ghosts.
Yeah.
When do you think this began, and why? Where did it come from? I mean, is it just because you do believe that maybe some people from purgatory or from heaven or hell are appearing, or is this due to our fears? What do you think is behind it?
Well, in terms of how far back it goes, I think it goes back as far as humanity does. The belief in the afterlife is a human universal. It occurs in every single human culture, and that's a sign, incidentally, that the afterlife is real. As you know, C.S. Lewis has a famous argument about if there is a fundamental belief or desire in a life form, it indicates there is some reality corresponding to that. The examples that he gives are, men get hungry and they desire sexual intercourse. Well, food and sex are real things. Or, ducks, when you take them out, you got a little baby duckling, it's built to swim. That's evidence that there's water. So if you have humans that have an innate sense that the divine exists and the afterlife exists, and those are two human universals, then that's evidence that the divine and the afterlife both exist. So if the afterlife exists, as the Christian faith teaches, then you would naturally have people wondering, okay, so my relative is dead now. I mean, we're thinking primitive human beings right at the beginning. My relative is dead now, but I believe my relative is still alive in the afterlife. Is there any way we can have contact? You know, because they're still alive. They're not here, but maybe we can have some kind of contact and communication. And so you start looking for it. And your imagination can then lead you to think, well, maybe I'm in contact with my relative. Or you can misinterpret things, like maybe that noise I heard is my relative manifesting somehow. Or maybe God lets your relative manifest to you. So there are bunches of possibilities. And, you know, every culture has an equivalent of this. So I think this is as old as the human race. And I think the spectrum of options to explain it is basically the same as the spectrum of options today in terms of accounting for individual ghost reports.
What do you think of mediums? And do you think
use
that
them?
don't use? Do you think that they're in touch with something evil, or are they in touch with actual people who are departed? What's going on? Tell us, and why should we not use them?
Okay, so I recently did an episode on mediums. Let me see if I can get the episode number for you. But I go through all the theories about mediums in a bunch of detail. I want to say it was episode. No, it's not that one. Hang on just a second. I'll have it for you. It's episode 137 of Mysterious World. And so mediums are another thing that come up in basically every culture, because if you know your relative is dead, but you want contact with them, and who wouldn't want to know their relative is okay, then you may, and you're trying to find some way to make contact, you would want to go to a professional. And so whether they have the ability to or not, there are going to be people in every culture who will claim to be able to contact the dead for you. And there are. Now, by the way, this is forbidden in Deuteronomy 18. God says, don't use these people. Mm-hmm. Instead of getting your knowledge from a medium who's calling up the dead, I'm going to send you prophets. And that's how you're going to get your supernatural knowledge, is from the prophets rather than from the dead. Notice this implies ancient Israelites believed in an afterlife. Sometimes you will hear people who don't really know what they're talking about saying, oh, they didn't believe in an afterlife. Yes, they did. Otherwise, there's no point in forbidding people from contacting the dead. So this of itself is a nice illustration of how being gathered to your fathers didn't mean you go out of existence. But so spectrum of possibilities with mediums. Well, imagination. The medium may think they're in contact with the dead when they're not. Possibility number 2, the medium is a con. The medium is hoaxing this and doing it for money or appreciation or whatever it may be. Possibility number 3, the medium thinks that they're in contact with the dead, but maybe, and they even come up with impressive information that they couldn't know naturally, but maybe it's not the dead. Maybe they're just psychic. This is a possibility that began to be explored in the 19th century when the initially the British Society for Psychical Research and then its American equivalent got started. And these were societies run by very prestigious scientists. They were investigating what they called the survival hypothesis. Do we have scientific evidence that we survive beyond death? And so as part of exploring that question, they went to mediums. And they would test the mediums, and they found most of them were frauds or innocently mistaken. But sometimes the mediums would come up with information they could not have had naturally that seemed to go beyond random chance guessing. And they said, okay, this could be evidence they're in contact with a spirit, or it could be evidence that they're just psychic and they're picking up this information psychically, but because they believe in spirits, they're telling themselves that's where they're getting the info. So that's another hypothetical possibility that has to be taken seriously. Then there's the possibility they are in touch with the dead, even though they're not supposed to be. And then there's the possibility it's demons that are impersonating the dead. So all of those are possibilities that have to be taken into account. I think most mediums are either imagining it or hoaxing. If psychic abilities exist, which is a separate question, that could be an explanation. I also can't rule out that sometimes they are in contact with the dead, because we see that in the Bible. That happens in the Bible. In 1 Samuel 28, King Saul is at his wit's end because he needs to know about what's going to happen in an upcoming military battle. And he's been inquiring of the Lord, and God is not picking up the phone. God is not giving him an answer through the conventional means. So he goes to the Witch of Endor, who's a medium. And incidentally, she's the inspiration for the character Endora on Bewitched. That's who Endora is. She's the Witch of Endor after all this time. But in the Bible, the Witch of Endor calls up for Saul the spirit of the prophet Samuel so that Saul can interview him. And you read the text, and it presents it as Saul. Now, it presents it as Samuel. Now, some people will try to say, oh, this is a demon impersonating Saul, but that's not what the biblical author says. The biblical author says that Samuel came up and that Samuel said this and that Saul knew that it was Samuel and so forth. Know being a factive verb, meaning he was right. And so that's how 1 Samuel 28 presents it. Then you read later in the Catholic Bible, in Sirach confirms that it really was Samuel, that Samuel, as the prophet, spoke to the king from beyond his grave. And so the way the Bible presents it in both passages, this is really Samuel. And that would suggest that sometimes God can allow a medium to make contact with the dead. Now, you're not supposed to be doing this, and so you may have the same kind of message when you do contact the dead that King Saul got, which is, you're doomed, because that's what Samuel told Saul. And God could say, have your dead relatives say to you, thank you very much, but you're going to get in trouble with God for this. And then, of course, it is possible that demons could impersonate the dead in particular cases. Interestingly, from the scientific perspective, now I mentioned how they started studying this in the 19th century. Well, parapsychology has continued to develop since then, and actually, parapsychologists have been on the forefront of, because they know how much skepticism they're going to get from their colleagues in the scientific community. They've actually been on the forefront of making their tests more rigorous. And, for example, a standard kind of a typical standard of scientific rigor is what's called a double-blind experiment, where let's say you're giving drugs to some people to test how effective they are, let's say a COVID vaccine. And you have a control group, and you have a group that's getting a placebo, and then you have the real group. Well, you need to have, in order to have a good test, you need neither group to know whether they're getting the vaccine or the placebo. That's a single blind. You also need the people who are giving them the drug to also not know, because otherwise they might accidentally signal to someone, oh yeah, this isn't really going to help you, or oh yeah, this really is, and that'll skew your results. So that's the second layer of blinding you need. Well, modern parapsychologists have actually been developing studies that are quintuple blind, where nobody involved has the full picture. And they've done this with mediums, to where they will take a group of people who have dead relatives they want contacted, and these are called sitters in mediumistic terminology. The sitter is the person who wants to make contact. And then they have the mediums who are going to make contact. And they don't let the two meet each other. They will have intermediaries who go to the medium and say, there's a person, the only thing you're allowed to know about this person is that they're dead and this is their first name. And we want you to make contact with this person, and we want you to find out about them, including things like how did they die. And then they'll get the medium to do that, and they'll write down all the relevant details, and then they'll check it. And now, of course, there are hits and misses. The question is, are the hits beyond chance? And the argument is that in some of these studies, yeah, they're beyond random chance, which would support either the hypothesis that the mediums are psychic, but telling themselves they're in contact with dead people, or the mediums are actually in contact with dead people, or the mediums are actually in contact with demons who are impersonating dead people. But one way or another, there is evidence that at least it is argued goes beyond random chance. Now, you could say also it's a huge statistical fluke, but these studies, some of them have been replicated. And so it's something that one shouldn't simply dismiss out of hand. One should take this seriously. Whatever the correct interpretation of this is, something weird is going on here.
I want to ask one more question before I get to the super chat ones. Mm-hmm. Going to demons.
Yeah.
My question here is that I've seen some cases where Catholic dioceses have consulted mediums in addition to exorcists. Yes, very disturbing. Wow. Very disturbing. In consultation with the exorcist, they, in one particular case, they consulted the vicar general and with the permission of the bishop, and the exorcist consulted a medium. And the medium comes in the house and determines what the name of the demon is, and so they were able to cast out the demon because now they have its name through this medium. The medium, by the way, also believes in reincarnation and all kinds of heretical things. Ooh. What do you think about things like that, where you have Satan basically casting out Satan in light of Jesus's words, where he says that can't be done? What do you think about cases like that?
Well, I don't know that I would put that in the same category as Satan casting out Satan. In that case, you have a human who ostensibly is getting in contact with the demon and learning something like its name that the exorcist then uses. But it's the exorcist, by the power of Jesus Christ, that is driving out the demon. It is not Satan driving out the demon. Now, maybe a human used an illicit procedure to find out something that the exorcist then employed, but it's not Satan casting out Satan.
But Satan lets them know the name. You know, why would they tell them the name if they know that they're going to use that to cast them out?
Well, maybe they didn't know that. I mean, demons are not omniscient; they don't know everything. And so maybe, I mean, you know, if you have a person who's, let's say, not a medium, but is in a family where there's a possessed person, okay, let's say I'm the father of the family, I've got a child that's possessed, I'm talking to the possessed child, and I say, what is your name? You know, what am I supposed to call you now that you're controlling my child? The demon may give me a name. Now, demons don't have names in the sense that we do, because our names are sounds that are attached to us, and sounds are physical things. So any name that an angel or a demon gives you is an analog to, but is not really a set of sounds that uniquely attaches to that. They don't have language the way we do, because they don't have lips and vocal cords and lungs and so forth. So they don't have spoken language. But if I'm the father in the family and I get pieces of information that the demon gives me, I can share those with the exorcist. And also, I don't think demons really, their plan is not to stay here forever inside this person. They, you know, at some point they want to get back on the road again and make mischief elsewhere. So I don't think they're wedded to staying in a body at all costs.
Mm-hmm. This one is from Chris Isley. He says, do you think the extraterrestrials are a modern demonic manifestation if you view the abductions as a sexual assault like the incubus and succubus?
So I don't think that it's impossible. I think that there are multiple explanations for alien encounters, including abductions. I think a lot of abductions are people's imagination. I think a lot of it, some and others are hoaxes. So I think, as with any situation, we have to look at the individual cases. Now, it could be that there are some incubi, succubi type encounters that are then interpreted by the person as being aliens rather than demons. However, I'd have to look at the evidence in a particular case. One thing that would tell, I think, against that idea is if they are showing up in something that seems to be a nuts and bolts ship. Because even though I think I have a general principle that I use on Mysterious World, which is take every phenomenon at face value until you have evidence that it should be taken some other way. If you don't follow that principle, you're going to be paranoid and destroy your life. Because Michael Lofton, you appear to be Michael Lofton, but how do I know you're not secretly a demon
Right.
that's trying to trick me? Well, you have to take your experiences at face value until you have evidence that they should be taken some other way. And so if something shows up that seems to be operating a nuts and bolts craft of some kind, that's not part of the standard demonic paradigm down through history. That presents itself as something physical and mechanical, and that suggests aliens rather than demons. Could an alien come up with a nuts and bolt? I mean, could a demon come up with a nuts and bolt ship? Sure. I don't have a reason to say they can't, but that's not their historic pattern. And so I would say if something shows up with a nuts and bolt ship and you know it's real and it's not just a hallucination or whatever, then I would say you should take it at face value like anything else until you have evidence it's something else.
Mihavel P sends a super chat and says, Jimmy, did you look into my idea about Neanderthals? I don't know what his idea is, but
well, I've looked into ideas about Neanderthals, and I have plans for future programs that involve Neanderthals and other seeming human ancestors. I recently answered, and this may be what he's referring to, but I recently answered a question. I want to say it was on Catholic Answers Live about how Neanderthals and other human ancestors match with the biblical conception of man. How do you match the biblical vision of man against the paleontological record? And the short answer is there's no definitive way to do that. We have what you could call the biblical or theological man that we are. We are clearly human beings in the biblical sense of the term. And so we know that goes back to some origin point in human history, but how that maps onto the paleontological record, we don't know. And it would even be hard to figure that out because you can't measure when does this hominid have a fully modern soul. You can't. I mean, Aquinas would say every living thing has a soul of one kind or another. How do you know when that soul becomes fully rational in the human sense? The paleontological record doesn't seem to capture that information in a clear way. So it could be, depending on where you draw the lines and what you consider fully human rational, it could be Neanderthals are biblical humans. They're just a different race, just like we have different races today. Or it could be that they're not. They're something close to us, but they're not fully biblical humans. So it's hard to say.
Nth Degree says, what of the School of Africa in 1994? A large number of children saw a ship and alien in the field. As adults, they maintained the story.
I am always looking for new cases to investigate. I have not had a chance to investigate that one yet, so I wouldn't be able, and so I don't have an informed opinion. I wouldn't be able to evaluate it one way or the other without looking at the evidence. I always try to be open when I haven't seen the evidence.
The Castman asks, if Bigfoot has a human soul, could he receive the sacraments, including holy orders? If yes, could we have a Bigfoot Pope today?
Okay, so I would invite you to listen, and this actually, something very much like this just came up on Twitter today. But basically, I'd suggest you listen to episode 55 of Mysterious World on aliens and religion, and the same principles would apply to rational terrestrial organisms other than man. So if Bigfoot is rational, I would say if Bigfoot requests baptism, you can baptize him, because at least conditionally, because that's showing an awareness of a need for what baptism offers. And if someone is aware of it and asks for it, how do you say no to that? But
Jesus took on our human flesh. He didn't take on Bigfoot flesh. What do you say to that?
So there are a couple of possibilities. Number one, in the case of Bigfoot, there are people who will argue it's a species of human. But number two, just because something's not human doesn't mean that Jesus didn't pay an infinite price that could cover it. And if it wants the redemption that comes from Jesus, if it asks for the redemption that comes from Jesus, the presumption is going to be it's capable of receiving the redemption that comes from Jesus. That's actually, there's a indirect way of supporting that from the Catechism, because the Catechism says the reason that demons cannot be saved is not because the mercy of God is limited. God would give them his mercy if they wanted it. They just don't want it. And so if you've got a Bigfoot or a gray alien that says, I recognize my sin and I want to be forgiven through Jesus Christ, please baptize me, the safe thing to do is baptize them, at least using the conditional formula, I baptize you if you're capable of receiving baptism. But there's more to say about all that. Ordination is a much harder question. But baptism is the easy one. But check out episode 55.
Knight 1212 says or asks, has Jimmy heard of Father Seraphim Rose and thoughts on him? God bless you all both.
I don't know that I may have encountered the name, but I don't have specific enough information to have an opinion.
I think he's an Eastern Orthodox priest, but I think he is of the view that aliens are demons.
Well, I'd love to see his evidence. I'm always open to evidence. I just haven't seen it. Frankly, though, just to say another word about the demons hypothesis, St. Paul in Romans talks about how, to his Jewish readers, about how things they're doing are causing God to be blasphemed among the Gentiles. And it is possible for people who are trying to follow God, including Jewish Christians in the case of the book of Romans, to give scandal to people who are outside the fold. And this is something St. Augustine talks about. He talks about it in Scientific Matters. He says that, if a non-Christian hears a Christian babbling ridiculously about scientific matters that the non-Christian knows about, it's going to scandalize him. It's going to push him away from God. Well, if Christians leap to it's demons every time they're thinking about something strange without evidence that it's demons in a particular case, the same thing's going to happen. They're going to make Christians to outsiders. They're going to harm the cause of the gospel by making Christians look like a bunch of superstitious, demon-happy, obsessed people who are not considering the range of possibilities that could actually explain something. So I think as Christians, we need to set an example of thinking through all the possibilities and then seeing what does the evidence support in particular cases and not automatically leap to its demons.
Hercule asks, can you go further into psychic powers? Yeah.
So the basic idea behind psychic powers, and I also, forgive me for referencing these topics as they come up on Mysterious World, but for people who want more, I did episode 79 is on religion, magic, psychic phenomena, and science, and how to differentiate those concepts. Basically, the way psychic powers are understood in a modern context is they are weak but natural human abilities. So these would be abilities that are based in human nature. You don't have to use spirits or anything like that. If you're doing that, it's something other than a typical psychic power. So the idea could be that they're based in our spirits, or that they're based in our bodies, or that they're based in a combination of our spirits and our bodies working together. But the idea is they are weak but natural abilities that we have to either know or do things through non-traditional methods. So, for example, in the case of remote viewing, you would have the ability to get sensory impressions of a distant target without using your conventional senses. You're not seeing it with your eyes or hearing it with your ears or smelling it with your nose. It's some other, but still natural human ability. Now, scientifically, that's a hypothesis that needs to be explored and investigated. And the evidence is more interesting than people might think. It's disputed. You will have some statisticians who will look into it. Actually, I'll give you a specific example. When the Stargate program got closed down in the 1990s, the CIA commissioned a study. They got a couple of people who have statistical background to review a bunch of cases, and that the Stargate remote viewers had worked. And they then did a statistical summary of, okay, what does the evidence say? And to make sure that the study was unbiased, they put on the two lead academics that they appointed to do the study. One of them was a believer and one of them was a skeptic. And so the believer, who was the head of the American Statistical Association, came back with, the evidence here is way beyond chance. This has clearly been demonstrated. The skeptic, who was a guy named Ray Hyman, who's famous as a skeptic, came back and said, well, there's something statistical going on here. I'm not convinced it's psychic, but it needs more study. So when you have even a skeptic saying that, that's significant. That there's some evidence here that needs to be taken seriously. So that's just from a scientific reason perspective. What can we say from a faith perspective? Well, not a lot of people know this because not a lot of people study it. But there's actually a place for this in the history of Catholic thought. St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, among others, held that humans do have weak natural abilities that today we would consider psychic. In the case of both St. Augustine and St. Thomas Aquinas, I know, and by the way, you want to check out episodes 105 and 106 of Mysterious World for St. Thomas Aquinas and the occult, because I go through Aquinas's views on all kinds of different occult practices. And interestingly, he doesn't always leap to its demons. But he and Augustine agrees, held that humans have a weak natural ability to predict the future probabilistically. It's not as certain as divine revelation, because if God says something, it's right. But they would say we have this weak natural ability to predict the future, and it can manifest in dreams. And Aquinas called this natural prophecy to distinguish it from the supernatural prophecy that God gives. So he thought humans have this weak natural ability to sometimes learn about the future. Today, we would call that precognition. He also thought that we have a weak natural ability to influence other people, and especially if we're mad at them, if we want to harm them. And this was his explanation for the evil eye. Now, he had a theory about how exactly this worked in terms of the Aristotelian views of physics in the day, and those physics views have been superseded. But he thought humans can affect another human being at a distance, and cause bad things to happen to them. And that ability today would be called remote influencing or remote perturbation, or telekinesis or psychokinesis, depending on whose terminology you're using. But today that would be classified as a psychic ability. So this is not something that's completely foreign to Catholic thought.
One more super chat here from Angela. Father Ripper says that Judas sometimes shows up during exorcisms. Does this mean that the souls of the damned can possess the living? And then can demons travel freely between hell and earth?
Okay, so I'm not familiar, just answering the questions, I'm not familiar with the background to them. But can the damned possess the living? The best answer I could give to that is if God wants them to. Now, I would have another question, which is, how do you know it's really Judas? How do you know it's not a demon pretending to be Judas? Or for that matter, something that the possessed person is imagining? Because not every thought a possessed person has comes from a devil. They can have their own thoughts that get mixed in there. But if God wants to let a damned person possess the living, that could happen. I don't have good evidence for that happening. We don't see that happening in the Bible. The standard model, what we see in the Bible and down through history, is demons possessing humans. But if God wanted to let that happen, it could. What was the second question?
Can they travel freely between heaven and hell?
It depends on which ones you're talking about. We have evidence that some demons have already been confined to a kind of prison. This is actually what happens to the sons of God that impregnate the daughters of men in the Second Temple period literature that discusses that. Most demons you have are running around freely, but certain ones, like those, got confined to a pit in the spirit world. Now, who knows what all this spatial language means in the non-physical realm, but at least they're confined in such a way that they're not free to go about the world, and they're waiting for the day of judgment. And this is also reflected in the Gospels, where when Jesus encounters the Gadarene demoniacs, the demons say, "Have you come to torment us before the time? Please let us go into these pigs instead." And what they're afraid of is they're going to get thrown in the pit and confined like the other angels that are already there. And Jesus instead lets them go into the pigs, and that lets them out into the broader world to still make mischief. So some demons are around and able to move around, others are confined. Can they go up to heaven? Well, we see that in the book of Job. At the beginning of the book of Job, we see God is in his heavenly court with the sons of God, who are these angelic princes, and then Satan comes in. And God says, "Where have you been?" And Satan says, "Well, I've been walking up and down on the earth." And God says, "Hey, have you noticed Job, my servant? What a good guy." And that launches the plot of the book of Job. So that depicts the devil as having access to heaven, at least at that time. But when you get to the book of Revelation, you have the devil depicted in heaven. This is in Revelation 12, and he's cast out of heaven. And that suggests he no longer has that kind of access. So now he's confined to the earthly realm, but is not yet, or at least till the end of the book of Revelation, isn't confined to the pit or the final judgment. So actually, I should say, in Revelation 20, he does get confined to the pit. And the standard historical understanding of that in Catholic circles is that's when we're living right now. A time when the devil is confined in such a way that he can't stop the proclamation of the gospel. And so today, like the Old Testament prophet said, the earth is covered with the knowledge of the Lord like the waters cover the sea. But eventually, he'll be released again. There will be the final confrontation, and then he'll be cast into the lake of fire. Now, we have to, like I said, be careful about what all this spatial language means, because it's trying to help us understand a realm that we're not built to operate in. You know, we're not built to function in that realm. We're built to function on earth. So it's comparing things in the spiritual world to things on earth, like being confined in a pit. We know what that means in a physical context, but angels don't have, and demons don't have bodies. So it may not mean the same thing. So saying the devil is confined to the abyss means he's not able to deceive the nations anymore. That's what Revelation says. So he can't stop the gospel, but that doesn't mean he can't be active in the world in other ways. But there's some kind of confinement on him spiritually.
That makes sense. That's all the super chats that I see. Jimmy, I want to thank you so much for coming on and doing this. This was extremely helpful, fun. I'd love to have you back on.
Yeah, anytime. My pleasure. I love thinking through possibilities. I do want to caution people, don't settle. Even though it's interesting to think about possibilities, don't grab one just because it's attractive. You need to think carefully and review the evidence carefully before you settle on a possibility. So don't simply say, "Ooh, I like that idea. It must be true," or "Ooh, I hate that idea. It must be false." I'm not here to propose particular solutions, but just to sketch the landscape, so to speak, and give my own preliminary thoughts. But I'm not settled on dogmatically on these various things, and I would suggest you travel lightly as well.
Yeah, and put in a plug for anything that you want to, make us aware of.
Sure, yeah. So be sure and check out Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. There's a version of it available here on YouTube. You can also get it wherever you get your podcasts, including the Apple Podcast app, and at sqpn.com. But it's widely available on the internet. Just type in Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. It'll come up. There's lots of great content. We have over 150 episodes now. In fact, our 151st is going to launch on Friday, and we're going to be telling you about an event from 1962 where the Joint Chiefs of Staff of the U.S. Armed Forces proposed a plan to President Kennedy to stage terrorist attacks on U.S. soil and possibly kill people. It's called Operation Northwoods. This really happened. It was declassified in the 1990s, and it's an amazing story. So check that out. We cover both natural and supernatural mysteries, so there's something there for everybody, and we always look at them from both the perspectives of faith and reason.
Again, thank you for coming on. Look forward to have you on again in the future.
My pleasure.
And everybody, of course, thank y'all for watching. Don't forget to comment, like, and subscribe. Hit the bell for notifications, and also check us out, patreon.com/Reason and Theology, if you want to support us and get access to extra content. Till next time, God bless you all.